And ladies and gentlemen, we're back with another HSI analysis, and here we are with the final character in the list, at least for the standard characters that are here on the launch day on the 26th of April. We're here with Mr. Yanqing, an ice hunt character. And let me tell you, this character is pretty good in my opinion. But first of all, what is ice and what is hunt? Well, ice is just an element in the game, doesn't really matter. But hunt is a single target DPS, and let me tell you something. Mr. Yanqing does that job to the T. This mate is going to be one of the higher throughput single target damage dealers out there because a lot of the stuff in his kit. So let's get into that so-called kit right now. We're going to start off with his skill. You deal ice damage equal to a certain percentage of Yanqing's attack to a single enemy, and you activate the Empathic Sword Link for 1 turn. It's a pretty good skill, and I'll explain what Empathic Sword Link does in just a short while. His ultimate increases Yanqing's crit rate by 60%. As soon as you use the ultimate, your crit rate will be increased by 60 flat, guaranteed. When Empathic Sword Link is active, increases Yanqing's crit damage by an extra so-and-so percent for 1 turn before dealing ice damage equal to a certain percentage of Yanqing's attack to a single enemy. And that is partially what the Empathic Sword Link does. That is half of it, essentially, is that baseline, his ultimate will have the increased crit rate. That is guaranteed with his ultimate. But with the Empathic Sword Link, which can only be granted through his skill, you will get the crit damage bonus here as well. And then on top of that, the ultimate also has a pretty decent amount of damage with 378% of his attack to a single enemy baseline, which is quite good. And to be quite frank with you, just looking at his ultimate, it is extremely potent just because of that crit rate bonus. His ultimate is, I won't say guaranteed to crit, but if you've got any semblance of a character by any point of the game, mainly talking about end game, if you've got any kind of character and you're rocking this guy and your ultimate is not critting, maybe look into getting some fucking crit rate, you know what I mean? But yeah, sorry for the aggression there, but it's very potent. But going on to his talent now, when Empathic Sword Link is active, Yanqing is less likely to be attacked by enemies. And then, furthermore, his crit rate is increased by another so-and-so percentage up to 21, and his crit damage increases by 33 at the high end, but also just so-and-so percentage. After Yanqing attacks an enemy, there is a certain percentage, fixed chance, so not alterable by effect hit rate, it is fixed chance to perform a follow-up attack. Dealing ice damage equal to a certain percentage of his own attack to the enemy, which also has a 65 base chance to freeze the enemy. This percentage, on the other hand, is alterable by effect hit rate as it is base chance for 1 turn. The frozen target cannot take actions and receives ice dot damage equal to a certain percentage of Yanqing's attack at the beginning of each turn. When Yanqing receives damage, the Empathic Sword Link will disappear. Now that is a lot to take in, but I'll summarize it like this. When you have Empathic Sword Link up, you are less likely to be attacked, right? When you have that buff up that your skill grants, you are less likely to be attacked. Then furthermore, his crit rate is increased by 21% at the high end, and crit damage increased by 33% at the high end, which is very strong. And then, after Yanqing attacks an enemy, there is a fixed chance to have a follow-up attack happen, dealing a certain percentage of damage to the enemy. And then you have a 65% base chance to freeze the enemy. Simple as that, and then that freeze also does a lot of damage. It's a lot of numbers to take into consideration, but essentially, if you look at it this way, is that when you have Empathic Sword Link up, you're going to be dealing a lot of damage. That's the simplified version. Empathic Sword Link, right? I'll write it up, right? Empathic Sword Link, damage. Rather, for you guys, it's over here to here, because that's how it looks like on your screens. But Empathic Sword Link equals damage. End of story, right? That's how it works. Now, going on to his technique, after he's used his technique at the beginning of the next battle, Yanqing deals 30% more damage for 3 turns to targets whose HP is equal to or higher than 40 of Yanqing's max HP. It's kind of a situational, technically situational kind of burst mode. You get 30% damage for 3 turns when the enemy has higher max HP than your own Yanqing. It's, again, very situational, but it is actually also very useful because it is for 3 turns, and it's 30% damage bonus for just Yanqing. And if you're running him as your main DPS, it's going to be very, very good for you. So decent technique. Now, quickly dropping down to his traces, as they are kind of very simple to understand. First trace is when Yanqing attacks, deal additional ice damage equal to 30% of Yanqing's attack to targets with ice weakness. They have to be very specifically weak to ice. They can't be weak to anything else, but you just deal more damage to them when you attack, essentially. Trace 2, when Empathic Sword Link is active, effect resistance increases by 20%. You resist dots a lot more with your skill Empathic Sword Link active, so it's quite handy there. And then last trace, when a crit hit is triggered, increase speed by 10%, making him a bit faster when you land a crit. And I'll say this right now, if you're not landing crits, well, something's wrong. And that is the character baseline, not looking at Eidolons just yet. The character is, like, you know, I don't want to say it, but I think top 3 best, I may even say top 2 best single target DPS characters just with their standard kit. Very easy. It's a competition between Mr. Yanqing and Sealy right now in terms of single target DPS. And I would even argue that, in terms of just general dealing damage, Yanqing does skyrocket very highly into at least the top 3 to top 4 because of so many things. There's so much crit rate boosting, there's so much crit damage boosting just in his standalone kit without taking into consideration relic sets, light cones, and all the other sorts that you can apply to him through allies and whatnot. He's such a strong character, and a very high value if you do get him as one of your first, as you can kind of neglect a lot of your let's say stat management, as he provides all the crucial stats just naturally through his own kit. But then again, characters get enhanced with Eidolons. So let's take a look at those just now. So starting off with the Eidolons, first Eidolon, when Yanqing attacks a frozen enemy, he deals ice damage equal to 100% of his attack and removes the frozen effect on the target immediately. You can essentially look at this as you're shattering the freeze. It's not exactly like that. You are removing it, obviously, but I think for simplicity's sake, you can look at his first Eidolon as a shattering of the freeze. The enemy does have to be frozen, but you can shatter the thing and deal more damage to him. So it's quite handy. Eidolon 2, when Empathic Sword Link is active, energy regeneration rate increases by an additional 12%. Now this one sounds kind of weak, but it is moderately powerful, seeing as he's like somewhat of a ultimate dependent character, as that is where 90% of his damage is going to come from, is ultimate. And being able to regenerate all the way back into that ultimate constantly and as quickly as humanly possible is actually going to be a very powerful thing. Now, will you actually want to try to build a relic set around energy regeneration? No. But getting energy regen through other means, something like as simple as an Eidolon, is actually extremely potent. Now, obviously, Empathic Sword Link doesn't last for a long time, and it's not going to be overly useful if you are using his skill to get the buff and then his ultimate to then lose the buff. But, in the meantime, whilst you are using the character, let's say you're just using skill after skill to just build up your ultimate energy rate, essentially, it's going to speed up that process of getting to your ultimate a lot faster. Moving down to Eidolon 4, when his current HP is above 80% of his max HP, Yanqing's ice resistance penetration increases by 20%, essentially at the start of the fight, making him much more effective against ice resistant, or rather ice weakness enemies, or even ice resistant enemies, as it will penetrate more of their resistance, essentially making him better with ice damage. Overall, buffing his ice damage is the simple way to look at it, right? By 20%. On some characters, it will feel different, obviously, because some have higher and lower ice resistance. But overall, at the start of a fight, when your HP, Mr. Yanqing's HP, is above 80%, you get to deal more ice damage, which is overall very good. It's very good. It's universal, right? It's universal, and that's what you want from your Eidolons, your other things like this, is universality, because it means it's usable everywhere. And now the last Eidolon is, it's okay. Again, it's not a super high powerhouse like some other Eidolons we've seen, but here's what it does. If an enemy is defeated while Yanqing is receiving buffs from his ultimate, the duration of said buff increases by 1 turn, which again is very situational, and you're not going to use it. It's not going to be overly useful in every area of the game. But if we scroll back up to what his actual ultimate does, is that buff is the crit damage boost for 1 turn, essentially. That is what that buff is. And so being able to kind of maintain that 54% crit damage boost for an extra turn, if you get a kill with his ultimate, is very powerful. And the situations where it is powerful is essentially the rapid fire fighting modes, right? Where you're fighting enemy after enemy, and if obviously you don't have an AoE character, Yanqing can essentially one-shot one character, or one-shot one enemy rather, one after the other, single-handedly most likely, with the amount of damage that he'll be able to throughput here. So in that situation, he's going to be very powerful, and his C6 is going to be, or rather E6 I should say, is going to be very potent. But in other situations, it's a very lackluster. In his prime situation, which is single target boss fights, I would easily say that his E6 is easily avoidable. And yeah, looking at his Eidolons, probably, like, again, the highest value one is going to be somewhere around the E1, E2 range. E4 is actually a pretty big game changer. Now, the reason it's hard for me to recommend going all the way to E4 is because you have to go through his E3. Now, E3 isn't by any means bad, because it is just a flat boost in terms of damage, but it's his skill and basic attack, right? If this was his ultimate, it would be a completely different story, and I'd be 100% saying E4 is his extremely potent area, and that's the highest I would recommend anyone go. But because E3 is his skill +2, and you don't get the, getting levels up into it doesn't make your empathic sword link any stronger. It just makes your damage stronger. Now, obviously, again, like I said, it's not bad, but if the ultimate is where the real damage potency comes from, right? The ultimate is where the real kicking damage is, right? So that's the slight difference between the two recommendations. I would still say that E4 is his, like his prime. That's where he's going to be the most powerful. E5, rather, obviously, but that's obvious, rather. But in terms of like the 4 Eidolons that are interchangeable, or that do something different, E4 is the stopping point that I'm recommending. But yeah, that is essentially it. Very powerful unit. Overall, I'm again putting him up there in the top 3 best DPSs easily. I think he's going to be an absolute unit once you get, in regards to a perfect build for him. I believe, with best light cone and best gear, he'll be an unstoppable unit in terms of damage. Now, when you don't have the best things, I think he'll still perform extremely well, because he supplies so many of the required stats to himself that if you even wanted to, you could even go for a full attack build, attack percentage, with some crit damage on the side, or maybe even crit damage with attack on the side, and forget about all the crit rate, because he just supplies so much of that to himself that you most likely would not need it. But again, that's all in a prime world, and we don't live in a prime perfect world. And so now to go into the light cones, that's a weird segue into light cones. Let's get into the light cones and see what is up. Well, because he's a hunt character, we have to look at the hunt light cones, and I'll be honest with you, there's absolutely no bad choices here. You cannot mess this step up if you're looking at any of the 5 stars. It's impossible to fuck this up. Really, it absolutely is impossible to fuck this up. You have so many choices, and all of them roughly do the same thing. Now, if you're looking for his signature, I believe Sleep Like the Dead is his signature. I can't quite tell with this picture here. It doesn't exactly look like him, but it's close enough to where I can assume that Sleep Like the Dead is his signature. Now, will Sleep Like the Dead be his best? It does increase crit damage, and it's one of the only ones that has a flat increase of crit damage here, right? In the Night has a crit damage increase to the ultimate, but it is situational, whilst Sleep Like the Dead does have a flat crit damage increase, so instantaneously it's going to be a lot better. Now, furthermore, when the basic attack or skill does not result in a crit hit, increase your crit rate by a further percentage, and then this can only be triggered one time every 3 turns. This last part is the part where it falls off a bit, is that this is not overly useful per se. Not that it's bad, you don't crit and then the next hit is guaranteed to crit, but it's not an overly useful thing, because it's, again, just crit rate, and he already has so much crit rate supplied to him through his base kit that you're not going to find a lot of value there, right? You're not going to find a lot of value. So Sleep Like the Dead may be his easy one to equip, but it's not going to be his highest performing one. What I do believe is his highest performing one is one of the next 2, Cruising in the Stellar Sea or In the Night. Now, In the Night is great. Crit rate boost just flat amount at the start here, and if you take everything into consideration, like his talent as well as his ultimate, the 60 plus the 21, and then here you just plus 12, that's at least, 80-something crit rate, just flat, essentially, whilst you have your empathic sword link up, which is extremely potent. And then furthermore, while the wearer is in battle, for every 10 speed that exceeds 100, increase the wearer's basic attack and skill damage by a certain percentage, and increase the crit damage of their ultimate by another percentage. This can stack up to 8 times. For raw ultimate throughput, this will most likely be your best. and per se consistent, as it is the highest crit rate you can get, as well the highest damage you can get for everything. The only difficulty here is that he's not a speed-oriented character, at least not innately. You're gonna have to really build speed through your relic sets here, and your at least your relic substats to try to get that 180 speed, right? Because you need 180 to trigger all 8 stacks. Now, do you need all 8 stacks at all times? Definitely not. But you're gonna really need to funnel into a lot of speed and also a lot of speed buffing through some of your support units to get that 180 speed. And so that's gonna be the tough part with this character. Because obviously, you know, Seely has a lot of speed boosting through her own kit, so she does a lot of that by herself. Yanqing doesn't quite do that. If you're looking for the most generic thing, and that's going to be a little bit more powerful than his signature, Cruising in the Stellar Sea is going to be it. Increases your crit rate by a flat percentage, further boosting your consistency. It increases their crit rate against enemies with HP less than or equal to 50 by an additional 8%. So it kind of, at the start, makes him pretty good, and then once you get to the execute phase of below 50% on the enemy's HP, you become an execute character. You start zip-zap-zopping them, right? And that's really good. And then, when the wearer defeats an enemy, increase their attack by a further percentage. Now, obviously, this last part you're not going to have all the time, but once you do get it one time, you have it for 3 turns, so it's extremely potent there. But again, if you're doing single-target bossing, I believe there is a game mode for that, it's not going to be overly useful. So, the hierarchy goes like this. In an ideal world, In the Night is going to be your best in slot. Then after that, it's going to be Cruising in the Stellar Sea, and then Sleep Like the Dead. But that's an ideal world. In a general world, all of them are going to be so close in power that it's not really going to matter in the end which one you use or not, right? That is my absolute honest answer, that the difference is negligible, right? The difference is negligible. And that is the 5 stars. Now, the 4 stars, well, here we go, another spiel, am I right? Only silence remains, increase attack of the wearer by a certain percentage. If there are fewer enemies, increase your crit rate by a further percentage. This one is going to be your easy slap on. You get attack boost and crit rate boost. The fewer the enemies are, you need 2 or fewer to actually trigger the effect of the crit rate boost. But yes, this is going to be the easiest one to equip out of the 4 stars. Furthermore, Return to Darkness, increase the wearer's crit rate by a flat percent, and then after a crit hit, there is a certain percentage chance that is fixed to dispel one buff on the enemy. If you have it and it's your only thing, it's going to be the best because of the crit rate boost, but that last part is practically useless on the character. And then Swordplay, which is Li Su Shang's. For each time the wearer hits the same target, damage dealt increases by a certain percentage, stacking up to 5 times. The stack effect will reset when you change targets. On pure single target, this one will give you the highest potential damage, as it does boost your attack by a lot, out of the 4-star variants I'm mainly talking about here. It does boost your attack by a lot, but obviously you have no crit rate bonus here, so you are going to be critting a lot less than if you had something like Only Silence Remains. And that's going to be the higher order, or hierarchy, sorry, not the higher order, the hierarchy of light codes that I recommend. It's going to go Only Silent Remains because you get an attack boost as well as crit rate boost for consistency, followed by Swordplay because it's raw throughput that you are getting there. The raw damage number is going to be much higher on pure single target. And then Return to Darkness if it's the only thing you have. That is going to be for the 4 stars. But then again, 5 stars are always better, so if you have any of these, slap it on there and have a great, great time. And lastly, the relic sets. This is the easiest character to kind of go with for relic sets. It's you're going to want to go for the ice damage one, which I, for some reason, can't find here. There it is, the Hunter of Glacial Forest. It's the easiest one, 2 set, 10% ice damage, 4 set after the wearer unleashes their ultimate, increase crit damage by 25% for 2 turns. It's more crit damage onto the character, i.e. more scaling, more damage, more Unga Boonga, and more Bazingas, right? So, 4 set Hunter of the Glacial Forest is going to be his easy best, nothing else really competes. Now for the planetary ornaments though, you've got 2 choices, and these are going to be my 2 choices, and I'm not going to suggest anything else because obviously he's a pure DPS character. It's going to be Celestial Differentiator and or Inert Salsodo. Now the reason I'm going to recommend Inert Salsodo higher than Celestial Differentiator is because it's ultimate damage, and his ultimate is his main damage dealer, and it's also follow-up attack, so it is going to be kind of viable. Now, it's not viable in all situations, as his follow-up attack doesn't have guaranteed. It has a fixed chance out of, was it 60 or 70%? I can't quite remember. Again, it was like, it's roughly around that area. You have a roughly 60% chance of a follow-up attack, but still you get some value if the follow-up attack does trigger. And another reason I recommend it is because of the threshold of 50% crit rate. Now, the 50% crit rate is there as like your current like known crit rate, and then you'll get the following effects. It's not about situational crit rate, right? Like his ultimate is situational crit rate boosting, and so that's why I recommend Inert Salsodo, because you just get to a baseline of 50 with the 8% boost that you get here, so you kind of need 42 baseline. And then obviously if you have like a light cone, it's super easy to get to 50. It's a bit tougher to get to 80, is essentially what I'm proposing here. It's a lot harder to get to 80 to get the bonuses. As well, his basic attack doesn't do much damage, so it's kind of like redundant for that. So Inert Cell Soda is my final recommendation, but Celestial Differentiator is not a bad one. Those are my only 2 recommendations for this character. That is that. That is Yanqing. That is the last character of the HSR character analysis. And by gods, has it been eye-opening to see the difference in kind of playstyles and difference in character potencies across the whole board. Yanqing is an absolutely astonishingly powerful unit. And if you do get him as one of your first units, he's going to be extremely powerful because, again, like I said, he kind of negates that early game stat grind. If you've played Genshin, you know what I'm talking about. If you played Genshin on day 1, the early day stat grind, you know, the first month, the first 2 weeks, the first 2 months or so, however long it was very, very tough if you're trying to get a good character. You were struggling, it was miserable, and you had nothing. But once you did get a good character, you were very good. Well, here's the thing. Yanqing kind of circumvents that whole thing because he's getting the good stats naturally from himself, and all you have to supply him with is a decent team and maybe some base attack, right? That's all you need to supply him with, and he'll be an absolute monster. While some other characters require a bit more fiddling with a lot of their stats, crit rate, crit damage, attack, speed, this, that, Yanqing negates 2 of those stats, which is crit damage and crit rate. And that's why I think, for me personally, once we get into the tier list, which will definitely, you know, within the next like week or so, I want to compile it and I want to give a lot of thought to the tier list. But once we get to it, I can almost guarantee Yanqing's place within the top 3 characters or the top 3 strongest units in this game. And that's this video. Hope you guys did enjoy. Yanqing is a unit, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If it was good, if it was helpful, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and have a great evening. Catch you guys in the next video, which is going to be the tier list. See you then. Peace out.